My obsession with a musical about balloons is a little bit too unhealthy, and I'm going to talk about it. I think we're in an era at the moment where there's just so many really exciting new British musicals, and seeing them get worked on is so thrilling. Like, there'll be times where you catch on to a musical at the very start of the process of working on it, and you can see it grow and grow and grow. And that is my position with 42 Balloons. I saw this musical with its first public workshop at the Vaudeville Theatre in 2022. And since then, this musical has grown, it's been worked on, and now it's getting its first full production at the Lowry in Manchester. Now, I am a southerner. I don't have money, but I scraped together what I could do to afford the coach to go up to Manchester so I could see 42 Balloons. And my God, was it worth it. 42 Balloons right now is one of the most exciting new British musicals. There is so much to love about it, and it's almost there, even in its first production. So, what did I love about 42 Balloons? What tiny tweaks does it need to make it perfect? Let's find out. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie. I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do the silliest ideas that pop into my head. And if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. But let's dive into a musical about a man flying with a bunch of balloons. If you can believe it, 42 Balloons is based on a true story, and the show knows how ridiculous this plot sounds, and how wild it comes across, and they play around with this in a nice tongue-in-cheek way, especially within the opening number. But yes, it's true. Back in the 1980s, specifically 1982, a man in America called Larry Walters gathered 42 weather balloons, tied them to a lawn chair, and flew himself 16,000 feet into the air from his girlfriend's mother's backyard. And 42 Balloons, using the format of musical theatre, specifically in this case a sung-through musical, to tell this story from beginning to the very end. And by God, it works. It doesn't feel like it should work, but it really works. And I think that is a testament to the creative team on this show. Specifically, I want to give mention to Jack Godfrey, the writer of all of the music, for how well this piece comes together. I think a lot of this is down to Larry Walters as a character. He feels so human, which makes sense because he is based off a real person, and the strong thematic focus on dreams. You get a real sense of the passion that Larry has for flying. From his first number in the show exploring how he wants to be a pilot, to how that dream was slightly crushed and how he tries to reframe it. It's a very human feeling. You know, that feeling of wanting to achieve something that seems so far away from you. So it's really easy to relate to Larry's character. Everyone who you meet has some kind of dream, whether it's big or small. And putting a lot of the focus onto that theme of the musical really brings you onto Larry's side. And it also just gives Larry so much depth. It's very easy to see how this focus to become a little bit one note. But you get a real sense of the reason why he wants to fly. You can really understand what's holding him back. And even beyond that, after the initial flight, there's so much exploration into the depth of it, the consequences that he wasn't quite expecting. There's so much here about Larry's character that makes him a fascinating protagonist. Then there's his girlfriend, Carol, who is nice in this musical, but is a little bit less thoroughly explored. I think this is more down to the nature of the story being very focused on Larry. A lot of Carol's place in the story is very much focused on Larry. It's all about Larry's dream and how she's helping Larry's dream. And I do wish there was a little bit more of a moment to dive into her as a character, rather than just how she reacts to this dream as a whole. But still, beyond that slight criticism, I think that Carol is a really interesting character, especially how she reacts to this. Initially putting off the dream and initially thinking it's so wild, but realizing how much it means to Larry, and because of how much Larry means to her, she goes along with it, putting her entire soul into this mission, which does in turn work to telling you a little bit more about her. This is a sung-through musical, And I really enjoy that because you don't really see enough sung-through musicals at the moment. In the initial workshop production, there was a lot more dialogue within there, or I guess lyrics within there. That's a better way to phrase it, because this is a sung-through musical. There's a lot of lyrics within it that are done in the third person, where characters will take a moment to describe how they're feeling themselves, I guess. For example, Carol will often go, Carol is feeling scared or dumbered or something. Larry's feeling happy that he's flying up in the air. These are not the actual lyrics. They're much better written than this. And they've kind of balanced it a little bit better in this specific production now, because I felt in the Vaudeville version, there were too many of these moments that were making it harder to connect to the characters. There's a nice balance between the two now, which gives you these reflective moments with the characters speaking directly to the audience and the third person moments. And I think that's a general sense of the show watching its journey. It feels so much tighter now. They've done such great work to really tighten the material. There's a lot more chemistry between this cast, especially with more fleshed out staging. And what is most tight in this production is that shift from Act 1 to Act 2. A lot of musicals about a specific event, about an inspirational moment, will end on the inspirational moment. It kind of makes sense in an adaptation because that's what this whole thing is about. This is about 42 Balloons. It's about the moment where Larry Walters flies up into the sky. But 42 Balloons is cleverer than that. It's so much cleverer because there's so much more story afterwards. This is a real life event. This really happened. And what happened after is really, really tragic. I won't go too far into it to avoid spoilers, but I think it really reflects real life. It keeps going. Even after the big dramatic event, life keeps rolling on and you see the aftermath of Larry's trip. And honestly, it ends up being even more interesting, because it's used so effectively to bring out those character flaws, to bring out the contrast between Carol and Larry, and show the consequences of such an event and the consequences of sometimes achieving your dream and it not ending up being exactly how you dreamed it would be. There's so much emotion that it dives into in Act 2 that just pushes the boat further and further out. It's so well structured in a way that just builds this story, and it becomes less about the 42 balloons and more about the people behind it. It's a really well-written adaptation of a true life event, building up to the event and showing you what happened after and giving you a real sense of the people involved in this story. But I don't even think the story is the best part of this musical, because this music that makes up the show is, I'm going to say it, I think it's my favorite new musical score I've heard in a long time. And I think that comes because it strikes a great balance. It's very 80s inspired. It's very clearly inspired by a lot of different styles of music in the 80s. There's a little bit of rap in there. There's a lot of pop. A lot of it feels like those classic 80s music videos. And my God, is it catchy. So many of these songs have just embedded themselves into my brain and will not leave me even since seeing this show. Honestly, some of them still haven't left me from when I saw it in 2022. It's not just catchy, it's also important to the story. Even in a lot of these strongest sung-free musicals, there's a lot of numbers in there that feel a little bit inconsequential. But I'm really hard-pressed to find that in 42 Balloons. Often, when I'm reviewing a show, I have my little notebook here and I write down all my notes and I will jot down a couple of the numbers that I feel like I want to talk about. This show, about half of the numbers are highlights that I want to talk about, which just shows the strength of this score. There's so much here and there's so much variety, and all of it absolutely slaps. There's a prologue, which is so perfect at bringing you into this story. It's so tongue-in-cheek, it sets up the tone so well, giving a soft introduction to Larry, telling you about the 42 balloons. And one of the funniest lines in the entire show is them just turning in this song to the audience and going, yes, it's actually happened. You can look it up after the show. And you can tell all your friends about it and they'll be like, why did you go see a musical about balloons? It's so funny, and brings you on side to this story from the very start, recognizing that, yeah, it's a bit ridiculous, but this actually happened. Do you want to know why it happened? Do you want to know how it happened? It ropes you in so perfectly. There's Larry's interview, a number that would feel quite inconsequential to a lot of the people, but gives you this lovely introduction to Larry. He's interviewing to join the military to be a pilot, and he's giving these very well-rehearsed answers to the questions that he's being asked, showing his passion for flying, how much he wants this. And within 2 minutes, it perfectly shows you that. And so when the rug is pulled out from under Larry, you really feel the impact of that moment along with him. There's Big Balloon, which is so fun. Larry's reaction to this news and clutching on tighter to that dream. You get the introduction to the love story between Carol and Larry in Up in the Air, which I think is really well contrasted with the song that comes immediately after, where Carol is told about the dream, which is aptly titled, Give It Up. Which out of all of the numbers, I feel like has some of the strongest, 80s pop vibes. It's very Cyndi Lauper. All of those songs, every single one of them that I've just mentioned, are the first 20 minutes of the musical. That's how hard it comes out punching, with bop after bop after bop that's so perfect at bringing you into this story, into these characters, and setting them all up for you. I think this show is also great with a little bit of comedic relief. Obviously, I've mentioned some of the pieces in the prologue, but I think Somebody's Story, the first song with Carol's mum, this is set in America, Carol's mom, is a great ballad that gives you a little bit of a breather in the story. And it's just so funny, especially with Gillian Hardy's delivery of it. There's so many more songs I want to mention. There's Do You Want to Know, which I have stuck in my head. I keep singing that one. There is a cut intro from this video where I couldn't stop singing Do You Want to Know? Because I was going to do You Want to Know? Do you want to know? My opinions on 42 Balloons. But I couldn't use it because I kept singing the song. And now it's back in my head again. Do you want to know? Do you want to know? But the musical can also slow it down in moments. You have something as crazy as this. A beautiful duet for Larry and Carol. But I think one of my favourite numbers in this show comes at the start of Act 2, where you get to see some people's reaction to the flight. This song is called 42 Balloons on a Lawn Chair, and it is a bop. This song, you can go and listen to it because it's part of the EP that they've released. Please go and do it because it's so, so good. And I promise you it will be stuck in your head for eternity. This is one number that I'm going to talk about a little bit within direction because I feel like there's a way that they can flesh it out a little bit more and make it even bigger. But my God, is the song catchy. And I love how it layers all of these different reactions to the flight. Some of them that will feel very comedic, some of them that feel very natural to something as crazy as this. And it's a perfectly fun way to open Act 2. I love a bit of fun, and this musical has fun. And it continues the fun in songs like What Dreams Can Do, Lawn Chair Larry, which is newly added to this version, I'm pretty sure, and is so good. It's so good. A perfect addition. But then it can also just twist the knife in like Act 2 does with a song like Helium, which I think is one of this show's masterpieces. A perfectly reflective number for Carol. Jack Godfrey is an absolute talent. He has crafted such a neat and well put together score, which effortlessly dives into all of these different 80s styles, blending them together into one cohesive score with fantastic lyrics, so clever, so witty, all focused on that theme of dreams and giving you such a deep insight to these really human characters, as well as just being so catchy, so fun, that I want a full cast album immediately. I am not happy with just having an EP. I want it all. Jack Godfrey's work on this show has to be commended to the highest degree. Now let's talk about the newest stuff, the stuff that has come within this production specifically, and that's the staging and the design. Obviously, in the previous workshops, we've seen a lot of this music, we've seen a lot of this material, and that's been tightened and tightened again. This is the stuff that they're trying out for the first time. They're trying out this new set, they're trying out a lot of the video design that they're using, and they're trying out this staging. And I think they're on the right track with this. I just think there's a lot of areas that they can tighten up. And if they do go into a West End theatre, there's a lot further they could push some of these ideas. In general, I like the direction that they're going. The set is very bare, almost looking a little bit like a skate ramp in a way, but obviously being a little bit reminiscent of a balloon. Although, just a slight nitpick, I wish that the curve that it makes also was reflected at the top, because I feel like you only get a little taste of the balloon and not the full like shape of the balloon that you could have if you just put two of those little black bars that they have at the bottom to create the shape at the top. Essentially, the stage looks a little bit like the poster, where it's cut off at the top, but it has the curvature at the bottom. I just wish that curvature would continue at the top as well. It's very nitpicky, I know, and that's why I'm starting it with this very nitpicky thing. I absolutely adore the video in this show. There's a mixture of live filming and pre-recorded that blends together seamlessly, and so much of it hits that perfect vibe of 80s music video that they're clearly going for. Especially numbers like Do You Wanna Know, which take it in a very silly direction with the recording and end up being perfectly comedic because of that. I think they've highlighted a lot of the key moments that they need to use it for, and is very impactful, especially in numbers like Big Balloon, with some brilliant uses of this video to really expand this space, which is, on the whole, fairly small. I think one of my favorite little pieces of direction comes towards the end of Act 1, where we see the balloons start to inflate. I won't say more than that, just to keep it as a lovely reveal, because I think it's such a smart bit of direction and a really great image. But I will say, if you count those balloons, there ain't 42. I understand it'd be very hard to put 42 balloons onto a stage, but the pedantic bit of my mind goes, that's not 42 balloons, and I want 42 balloons. But as I said, I think there are moments where they could push this a little bit further. I think the biggest thing that they need to do is put Larry into the lawn chair. I think it's very weird that throughout this musical, there is not a single moment where we see Larry fly up in that lawn chair. I think the whole musical is building towards that moment where we can actually see Larry himself lift off. And the fact that we don't get that, I think, is a shame. With a bigger theatre, a bigger stage, this is something that I feel like they could definitely achieve. And I think it's a very important part of the show that really feels like it's missing. There's some really fantastic choreography in here, very 80s inspired as usual. This small but tight ensemble are about the perfect size to add that little bit of depth in choreography. I love how they utilize the space a lot. I love how they surround Carol and Larry a lot of the time. I think it adds a really great element to this show. And this direction on a whole is really, really strong. I love the staging of a lot of these songs. The only one I do want to mention, as I alluded to previously, is 42 Balloons on a Lawn Chair, which is done very stagnantly, with just 4 ensemble members standing towards the front of the stage singing out to the audience. Especially for a number that is ensemble heavy, I think it's a shame that this wasn't a more dancier number, especially because it's already such an upbeat song. I think this moment in the show is really important, giving you that different perspective on Larry's trip. But I'm not sure if this staging quite reflects how this moment should be. All of these people kind of panicking and going, what the f***? Excuse my French. On the contrast, I love the staging of songs like Do You Wanna Know? Some great choreography, some great building, some great video design in there. I love the wacky, off-the-wall nature of what Dreams can do. This massive celebratory number where they're celebrating Larry's flight, bringing on these really big props and it being very, like, weird and off the wall to contrast what's about to happen. That joy they feel in the moment of we did it, and then real life coming in immediately after. Setting up that perfect contrast between the two within not just the material but also the staging. And let's talk finally about this cast. Charlie McCullough is so good. So good as Larry. He immediately sets up Larry as such a normal person. There's definitely an awkwardness about him, but you're so endeared to him, not just by how he comes across, but also his dream, which I think Charlie does a great job at really showing how important that is to Larry through the way he speaks about it. It's so clear that how dear to him it is. And I think that's what makes it so tragic when you get into the latter parts of Act 2, where you really see Larry push to his limits a bit more. Evelyn Hoskins as Carol is also phenomenal as well. I think she gets one of the strongest moments in this show through the song Helium, which she performs with such power. She allows herself to get roped in and mixed up with Larry's dream and ends up matching his passion for it. And even in the fights and the conflicts that the two have together, you get a real sense of the pair's love and how much this has ended up meaning to both of them. Gillian Hardy as Carol's mum is a great bit of comic relief, a really fantastic Saki portrayal, and the main gang of four is finished by LaJean Shepherd, who plays Ron, a really lovely addition to the main four, whose energy is really, really fun and engaging to watch. They are paired with this absolutely gorgeous ensemble of performers who all give it their absolute all. I want to highlight two specific performances out of this ensemble, mainly Madison Bullimont, who plays the kid, who actually isn't in the ensemble, only playing this kid role who kind of pops up for a few moments of the show. I'm really intrigued as to why this track isn't a part of the ensemble, but I do think it makes the reveal of the kid quite nice, coming as a little bit of a surprise. And I think Bullimont's performance is so endearing and so sweet, and perfectly with just their physicality and performance, they really get that sense of someone who is a little bit younger. And I also want to mention Jordan Broach, who is actually the understudy for the role that I saw. Funnily enough, these two that I've just mentioned, both non-binary. We love to see trans excellence on stage, and excellence it was. 42 Balloons is a musical that just needs 2 or 3 tweaks, and then it's going to be one of the best new musicals to come in a long time. And that leaves it in a place in its first full production, which is extremely healthy. I have seen musicals worked on for much longer than this that have needed even more work on them to make them work. But 42 Balloons has such a humanity running through it, such an interesting true story, and some of the best music I've heard in a new musical in a long time that makes it such a fantastic watch. As I said, my only real issues with this show are a couple of nitpicks. Some different choices in the direction I feel like they can push further. Some design work that can be tweaked ever so slightly. And honestly, if that is my biggest problem with a musical in its first full production, you are in the right place to be. 42 Balloons is a show you need to keep your eye on. There's only a week left for this musical to continue at the Lowry Theatre. It ends on Saturday, the 19th of May. And I am telling you, you need to catch it there if you can. Because you need the bragging rights for when this transfers to the West End. And please, I am begging for a West End transfer. Because this show has more than just potential. It's almost there. And when it gets there, it's going to rise higher, even higher than Larry's Journey. But what do you think? Have you seen 42 Balloons, either in the concert version at the Vaudeville or this current production at the Lowry? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on screen right now, and in the description, you can check me out on various other social medias, and check out my merch store. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!